There's an interesting study that was done where they placed 5 monkeys into a room, and they placed a ladder in the room, and the experimenters placed a bucket or a basket of bananas at the top of the ladder. And of course, the 5 monkeys wanted to run up the ladder and get the bananas. But what the experimenters did was they sprayed the monkeys with cold water every time they got on the ladder and started to move towards the bananas. And eventually, after a few times of getting sprayed with the cold water, the monkeys stopped trying to go up the ladder and pursue the bananas. So what was interesting is next, they pulled one monkey out of the experimental room at a time. And every time they pulled one monkey out, they put a new monkey in. And the new monkey in, who had never been sprayed with the water, had never been in that room before, sees the bananas at the top of the ladder, and the new monkey starts to run towards the ladder and starts to try to climb up the ladder towards the bananas. But the other 4 monkeys who were already in the room before and had been sprayed pull the new monkey down. They stop the new monkey from running up the ladder. Then, after a couple of times of trying that and being pulled back down, the new monkey stops trying to go up the ladder. So they replace another one of the original monkeys with a new monkey who does the same thing, and the process kind of repeats itself. The new monkey tries to run up the ladder. The old monkeys who've been in there, been sprayed by this cold water, pull the monkey down, stop the monkey from going up the ladder. The monkey eventually gives up trying to go up the ladder and then helps stop the next monkey. Well, eventually, after a few times of this, all 5 monkeys that were originally in the room and had been sprayed with water have been pulled out of the room. And all 5 monkeys that are now in the room have never been sprayed with water. And yet, none of them will try to go up the ladder. They've never been sprayed with the cold water. And yet, none of them will try to go up the ladder. And in fact, when one of them is replaced, all the other 4 will pull the new monkey down and prevent them from pursuing the banana because of the belief that was passed down to them that it was unsafe to run up the ladder and go for the bananas. What can we take from this? Well, a lot of our stories that we have about what's safe and what isn't were given to us by somebody else. A lot of the stories we have about what is good and what is bad were given to us by somebody else. Now, of course, when we receive stories from Jesus, we receive stories from God. Like, these are lasting truths. But how many stories have we received from people in our life that told us that something wasn't safe, or that something was wrong, or that something was bad, that affected our viewpoint on that thing? And we adopted the stories, just like the monkeys. And we began to believe, without any true evidence of our own, that that's not safe, or that's not right, or that is bad in some degree. This is really like human nature. I guess it's monkey nature also. But the reality is, so often the stories that we have about things and situations and experiences, many of them are not ours. And I want to invite us all to take a moment today to consider our stories and to potentially gain a new awareness around your stories. One of the things that we teach in our sales school for Christian coaches at Faith2Influence is we teach the art of influence. And the art of influence is first about your mindset. There's an internal and external art in how we show up on sales calls, coaching calls, speaking, etc. But the internal art of influence is all about what's going on in our own mind and our own heart. And what's happening inside of our own mind and our own heart greatly affects the way other people receive us, and greatly affects how easy it is for people to say yes and receive our leadership, how easy it is for people to say yes and receive our coaching, how easy it is for people to say yes and buy our product or service. What we believe about ourselves can be contagious. The way that we show up and the energy and the emotion that we show up in can be really contagious. And, we talk about different aspects of the art of influence, our identity, our emotional state in a given moment, but then also our stories. The stories that we tell ourselves, the soundtracks that run around up here, greatly affect the results that we get as salespeople, as coaches, and as leaders. Naturally, we're going to have stories about ourselves. We're going to have stories about money. We're going to have stories about sales. We're going to have stories about our price point or our service. We may have stories that we're telling ourselves unconsciously about our prospects and their capacity to afford our product or not. It's so easy to prejudge people. Gosh, I remember having a story. I sold Cutco knives when I was 18. It was my first sales job. And I remember getting referral to a house, and driving to this house like 40 minutes from where I lived, and then realizing it was in a trailer park. And I had never held a Cutco appointment in a trailer park before. These are in-home presentations. And as an 18-year-old, I would sometimes judge based on the outside of the house what I thought the likelihood of somebody buying one of our big sets would be. And I remember going to this appointment thinking, man, this person probably can't afford the big set of Cutco. And how wrong and unfair was that judgment, right? But that's what was going through my mind. And I remember knocking on the trailer door and the person wasn't home. Nobody answered. And so I sat in my car for a little bit. I opened up a bottle of water. I was waiting. And eventually the trailer next door showed up. They had driven their car away, and they brought their car back home, and a family of 4 piled out of the car. And I remember seeing them and just getting out of my car and saying, hey, do you know where your neighbor is? I'm supposed to have an appointment with them right now. And they're like, oh, no, I don't know. And they tried to call them for me and really tried to help me out. And they're like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, what was your appointment about? And I was like, oh, well, I was supposed to show them this product. It's called Cutco, and give them an opportunity, like look at some stuff for their kitchen knives and gardening tools and fishing products and stuff like that. I said, you know what? Would you guys be willing to have an appointment? I get paid just to show it, whether you buy or not. It's really helpful to me. I drove all the way out here. Would you be willing to meet with me? And they said yes. So now I'm not only like in the trailer park where I'm prejudging whether or not people can afford to buy, but now I'm meeting with somebody who doesn't know me, a stranger who I happen to run into, and is agreeing to an appointment on the spot. They haven't even prepared mentally from this. The 2 kids are just coming home from a soccer game. They've got their cleats and shin guards on, and they bring a table outside and agree to meet with me. And I hold my presentation. At the end of the presentation, they bought the Homemaker Plus 8, which was the big set at the time. It was a $1,000 knife set. And that taught me a great lesson, not to prejudge. And man, I've learned that so many different times over the course of my lifetime. But that was one example of potentially writing myself out of an opportunity. Now, thank God, even though I was slightly prejudging on the inside and imagining whether or not I thought they could buy, I was well trained by great mentors in my office that said, run the appointment no matter what, do your best no matter what, treat everybody fairly. And so I kind of had competing stories in my head about whether or not these people could buy and about treating everybody with respect and treating everybody fairly. And so I held the appointment, thankfully, and I learned that lesson when they made the big sale. And by the way, I was in some multi-million-dollar houses that didn't buy anything and surprised me in the other direction. And so I learned to be a little bit more open to people saying yes or no and to a number of different potential outcomes, but also just letting go of stories about whether or not people could buy. I realized that my job was to invite. Their job was to decide whether or not it was for them to say yes to. And so I started letting go of the responsibility of whether or not they could say yes or would say yes, and just remembering that it was my job to offer, my job to ask and invite, and let them make their own decision. And in some cases, to answer some good questions, and maybe to, as a coach, find a healthy way to challenge people to find their own truth and make a decision that's best for them. But in the reality, I can't make a decision for anybody else. I need to invite. And so that old story about, oh, these people can't afford it, was something that was removed from my head. It was removed from my thought process. It was removed from my soundtrack and replaced with a story that anybody who really wants to, or maybe most people who really want to, can find a way to afford the things that they really want. People can find a way to afford the things that they really want. Most people can find a way to afford the things that they really want. That's a more healthy story for me. And that it's okay for people to say yes or no. And I don't need to be offended whether they say yes or no. As long as I love and respect them, whether they say yes or no, they'll love and respect me, whether they say yes or no. So I no longer have this story. Some of us have seen people in our lives who had old stories and soundtracks that were really prejudiced, that were racist or were sexist, or were stories about money or salespeople. These are the ones, of course, that I deal with a lot, is money or salespeople. And many of these stories were passed down generation to generation, and they're not even our own experience, but we own the story just the same as our parents did and our grandparents did, whether the story is actually true or not. And so a story that I know a lot of Christian coaches and entrepreneurs have about money is that money is the root of all evil. or that money is bad, or earning money is greedy or bad in some way. And I just don't believe that that's true at all. I believe that the Bible says the love of money is the root of all evil. And so, yes, if we love money, if we make it an idol, if we put it above our neighbors and above God and the things that really matter, then yes, it's evil. It's bad. It has the potential to be bad. No question about it. But I also know that money can be a tool used for good. Money can fund a missionary doing great work all over the world to bring more people to Jesus. I know that when my business earns more, I can create jobs and pay people on my team. I know that the more I earn, the better I can provide for my family and my kids opportunities. I know that the more I earn, the more I give. My wife and I have always tithed 10 to 20%. And so my story about money is the more that I earn, the more I can give. I know that we've generously given to our neighbors and our community and people in need. When we hear a story of somebody who needs something, who's in a hardship, we aim to help. We say yes to helping again and again and again because God's blessed us. And we started those patterns of giving and tithing and supporting our neighbors before it was easy financially. We started doing that when it was really difficult. I remember in San Francisco, my wife and I had very high bills and our income was lower at that point. We were newly married. We were getting started in our careers and we were going into debt each month to give. God had called us to give that year in 2016, 20%. It was the year of radical giving for us, to double our giving, to feed somebody every day. We made sandwiches, or we invited people to our house, or we picked up tabs for people we didn't know at restaurants. We just found a way to feed somebody every day, and we gave 20%. And we were going into debt because the San Francisco cost of living was like 2 or 3 times what it cost to live in Colorado Springs. And Kara had a job search, and I was just like really launching with the startup that I was with and growing my income. And there was a time in the middle of the year that we recognized, wow, like we're going into debt giving this much. And Kara said, man, if we went back to giving 10% instead of 20, our financial situation could look like this at the end of the year. If we keep giving 20%, here's my projection for us. Should we keep doing this? And I remember thinking about that for only a moment or two and like just knowing like God called us to give. God called for this year of radical giving. Like this is what we need to do. We need to stay the course. And we did. And God began to bless us and bless us and bless us. And so much fruit has come from that year. And as we continue to give faithfully and we tithe faithfully, God's provided for us again and again and again and again in ways I can't even imagine. But we were giving when it was really hard. And God says in Malachi, give me your first and your best and see if I don't overflow the storehouse with abundance for you. And that's what he's done for us. And there have been other times that it was hard to give, but we continue to do so. And I know that God is taking care of us for that, and God is smiling upon that. And so my story around money is this. The more I earn, the more I can give. I have no resistance to earning money. I want to earn as much as I possibly can. And I want to give as much as I possibly can. That's a healthy relationship and a healthy story around that. I don't want to believe anybody else's stories. I don't want to be a monkey when it comes to money. I want to create what I believe is a true story for me right now in this time around money. But I want to do the same thing for sales. And this is what I really want to lean into. I know so many people have old stories about sales that are outdated. That sales is greedy. That salespeople are pushy. That sales is bad. That sales is dishonest, deceitful. That it's wrong. That there's something bad about it. And listen, like if you've watched any movies, you've watched The Wolf of Wall Street, you've watched some of the movies about the stock market or Bernie Madoff or these different things, like you have seen in movies and heard from your parents stories of salespeople who were dishonest, who had what I would call commission breath. And they were really focused on helping themselves more than they were caring about supporting the person they were with. They were an I win, you lose kind of salesperson who was putting everybody else at risk for their own gain. And those stories are real and they're bad and they have been bad. And they've left a bad taste in the mouths of the people who experience those things. And many of those people took that bad taste about what sales is and they passed it on to their kids and they passed it on to their kids. And you may be living in an old story about sales being this bad, deceitful, pushy, dishonest, manipulative thing. And I just want to let you know that it doesn't have to be like that for you. That doesn't have to be your story. I remember talking to Laura Nizer, one of our clients, one of my great friends, and asking her what her story about sales was. And she said, sales is pushy. And I said, Laura, are you pushy? And Laura said, no, I'm not. I said, if I put you on a sales call, Laura, would you just be pushy because you were on a sales call? And she laughed. She said, no, I can't do it. That's why I'm not good at sales. I can't be pushy. I said, okay, Laura, if you were on a sales call then and you're not going to be pushy, what would you be? How would you show up on that sales call? And she said, well, I'd be showing up in service. I'd want to serve the other person. I said, yeah, that sounds about right. So is sales with you pushy, Laura? And she said, no, I guess not. I said, what is sales with you? And Laura said, sales with me is service. And that became her new story. And sales became a lot easier for her after that. And I'll tell you what, she started holding sales calls after that. And her first couple of sales calls after that realization, she sold two $7,500 packages, $15,000 in a couple of days, and more than she had done in business the previous year. She's a newer coach trying to figure this all out, had some money mindset issues, had some sales issues. And she overcame those stories and built new, true, empowering stories. And that changed everything. That made everything easier for Laura. And her closing percentage is really high now. She does a really nice job on the calls that she holds. And so you might need to do the same thing. You might need to write down that old story you have about sales. Sales is pushy. Sales is evil. Sales is bad. Sales is manipulative. Whatever that story has been for you. And you might just cross that off. You might draw a line straight through that old story. And you could even write underneath in big capital letters, not true, not true, not for me. And then you might write the true, more empowering story underneath. Like sales with me is service. I believe sales with me is leadership. Sales with me is coaching with an invitation or an offer at the end of it. I believe sales, when done right, makes it as easy as possible for the right people to say yes. Nothing other than that. It's not forcing. It's not for the wrong people. I believe sales, when done right, simply makes it easy for the right people who could benefit from the product or service to say yes. I believe sales, when done right, helps people get more of what they want and become more of who God created them to become. I believe sales, when done right, is really good and it feels good for both sides. I believe sales, when done right, is win-win or no deal. And I even believe, I'll go as far as this, I believe sales, when done right, especially from Christian coaches with high value services that can impact and change people's lives forever, I believe sales, when done right, is love. Sales is love. I know it's a radical way of thinking about this, but those are my stories. And I'm not willing to be the monkey and just accept what everybody else in the culture, everybody else in the room, everybody else in the community believes about sales, or everybody else believes about money, or everybody else believes about coaching, or everybody else believes about my price or my offer, or whatever it is. I'm not even going to worry about what everybody else thinks. There's wisdom that we can receive from a few voices, and we need to choose the stories that we're going to tell ourselves and listen to again and again and again, like a soundtrack that's playing unconsciously in our minds. And it might be time to run up the ladder and get the bananas. It might be time to recognize that sales with you is something completely different, that money in your hands can be a tool for good for God's kingdom, and to remove the noise and the junk and the old stories and all of the resistance that has prevented you from showing up and being who God created you to be in your business, as a business leader, as a coach, as a salesperson. Let's make it easy for the right people to say yes by first saying yes to empowering stories for ourselves and getting our own minds right. I'm going to pray for this. God, I pray that you support us in the development of our minds, the renewing of our minds. God, I pray that you help us to have an empowered and positive and loving mindset in how we show up for ourselves and others in the process of sales, of coaching, of growing our businesses. God, I pray that our businesses become a reflection of you, that even in the strangest way, a sales call, a coaching call, a business interaction can feel like an expression of your love, that we could just show up with so much integrity and so much great intention and so much joy that people would be changed by even a sales call, an interaction with us where we listen, we ask great questions, we prioritize them, we see them, we create space for them, we listen to them, Give them our presence, God. I pray that they would just receive you in that. I pray, God, that we could show up with high integrity in our businesses and also grow smart, successful businesses. I pray that our businesses could provide for our families and give generously to our churches and to our communities and provide jobs and opportunities. God, I pray for ripples of effect through the success of our businesses and through our clients. And I pray that you just continue to provide for us and show us the next steps, and that you give us the courage to take the next steps. Even if the next step is something that's different than what we expected, like working on our mind so that we could take the next physical step forward in working on our businesses. I pray, God, that you help us do the real work that we need, and that you're proud of the work that we do, and that we serve the kingdom in the way that we show up. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you all. Thank you so much for listening in. I will certainly talk to you again soon.